The United States has once again failed to qualify for the Olympics, despite being a much larger nation with much more resources. Despite having one of the strongest rosters on paper in the tournament, the team has lost to Honduras, meaning that we will not be participating in the Olympics in the upcoming summer. So what happened? Where did it all go wrong? And where do we go from here? All that and more on this episode of the Yank Report. What's up? My name is Sam. Welcome to the Yank Report. If you're into U.S. soccer, somehow, despite all this disappointment, please hit that subscribe button, and that like button helps out the channel a whole lot. So hit that like button for me, even though this sucks and this is not going to be fun to talk about. Hit that like button anyway so more people can find the channel. So that's it. After all this discussion, after talking about this team for what feels like years, after postponing due to COVID and just waiting around, getting a preliminary roster, cutting down that preliminary roster, all that anticipation led up to this moment in the semifinal round against Honduras, and the United States failed at their stated goal of qualifying for the Olympics. You know, and in spite of all the great things that we have to look forward to, all the great things that have happened in the last 2 years with this program, with guys like Christian Pulisic and Gio Reyna, Serginho Dest, Wes McKennie emerging as world-class talents, this still feels like a punch in the gut. You know, we really wanted to qualify for the Olympics, and we failed to do so. So what happened? I think the brunt of the blame has to go with the coach. I mean, Jason Kreis was brought in for this goal, for qualifying for the Olympics, and in failing to do so, 100% of the blame falls on him. And the frustrating thing is, in his press conference following the game, his remarks did not sound like a guy who wanted to take on 100% of the blame. I mean, he said that the blame starts with him, but then he started to make excuses. He started to put it on the players. And in that press conference, we began to see maybe some hints as to why this team seemed to play with so little emotion and so little pride and so little organization. And I think that's the fundamental thing that I took away from this tournament. You know, in the 4 games that we saw, there wasn't any dominant performances from the national team, despite the fact that we had such a strong roster compared to the rest of the field. I mean, this Honduran team we played was made up the majority of players that play in the Honduran League, and the Honduran League is just not nearly as strong as MLS. I mean, whenever the roster was released, there was a ton of criticism on the lack of creativity and the amount of defensive midfielders brought into the tournament. I mean, between Johnny, Andres Perea, Jackson Yule, that's 3 guys of a roster of 20 that are only going to be able to play one single position. Now, we ended up deploying all 3 of them at one point, and despite Jason Kreis saying that we would be surprised at these guys' creativity and their ability to bring the ball up the field, we just didn't see it. We didn't see it from Johnny, who had just a miserable tournament. I mean, Johnny was one of my players to watch. I wanted to see him really take hold in this tournament and be one of the better players in the tournament, and that was just a failure all around. And then Jackson Yule, you know, Jackson Yule was really a hero in that last game against Honduras and was one of the few players on the field that you'd point to and say, like, that's a guy that looks like he wants to win this game, that's playing for his country. I mean, Jackson Yule as an 8, he just didn't really do it for me. He didn't have that creativity. He didn't have that ability to drive the ball from the defense to the attack, to link, to make things happen. And you know, whenever he was played at the 6, it was a little bit better, but it just wasn't that much better. He didn't seem like a step above the competition. Andres Perea had his moments, but he wasn't a shining light either. So we brought 3 6s, and none of them just seemed to function all that well. And we really didn't bring any attacking creativity. One of the most frustrating things about this whole tournament from the U.S. perspective that I saw is, you know, we entered the tournament with Jesus Ferreira as our starting number 9. You know, Jason Kreis talked about Ferreira before the tournament, said that he loved the way he plays. You know, Greg Berhalter likes the way that Ferreira plays. But in spite of all that, we didn't see an offense that was really set up to allow Ferreira to thrive. I mean, Ferreira did what he always does. He dropped back, he accepted the ball deep, he dropped into the hole and tried to create space for his teammates, and he did do that. But whenever he did that, we didn't see what we see with the national team. You know, you compare it to what the senior national team, what they did against Jamaica. Whenever Josh Sargent would drop in deep to receive the ball, you'd have players like Pulisic or Reyna or even Leggett covering that space, moving into that space that he created. And then once Leggett moved out of the midfield into the striker position, then you'd have like a Serginho Dest moving into that spot, or Kellen Acosta. There was a lot of positional rotation, and as those players rotated and covered each other's space, you created overloads, you created some confusion in the defense, which opened up space, which allowed players like Dest and Pulisic and Reyna just to really cause havoc. Now, compare that to this team, this Olympic qualifying team. Whenever Ferreira would drop in to receive the ball, you didn't see players moving into that space. We didn't see Cardoso moving into that striker position, or Salcedo, or Benji Michel, or any of these players. So all the good that's gained from Ferreira and his play style and what he does, it was just completely lost. So it begs the question, if the offense was supposed to be built around Ferreira, like what were they doing? Why didn't any of the players know? Why didn't we have players that were brought in that were more effective at filling these roles? Because obviously we brought in some guys that just weren't comfortable doing that. And speaking of not being comfortable doing that, I think my overall thing that I'm just really upset about with this whole ordeal is this idea that the system is the most important thing. One of the things that really frustrated me about Greg Berhalter early on in his tenure was that Gold Cup. In that Gold Cup, he wanted to play that possession-based style where we built from the back, and that was all fine and good whenever we had John Brooks and Tyler Adams in the team to really facilitate that building from the back. But when John Brooks and Tyler Adams were unavailable for that tournament, we ended up replacing them with guys who were just not so comfortable building out from the back. But we still forced that down our throats, man. We still forced the players to build from the back, and what happened was we just get crushed by Mexico in the final, and it just wasn't a pretty thing to watch. And then we see that lift its ugly head once again with this Olympic qualifying team, where Jason Kreis says building from the back is in our DNA and possession-based soccer is in our DNA. That's the way we're gonna play. What are you talking about? It's in our DNA. This team has only been together for a couple of weeks. How can you establish a DNA in that short period of time? Take the players that you have available to you and play based around their talents and abilities. Asking these players to build from the back was a recipe for disaster. And we saw that give up a goal in the Mexico game, and we saw that give up a goal in this game, unfortunately with David Ochoa making that mistake. But it wasn't just the goals that we gave up, it was the chances that we gave up, and it was just the lack of opportunities moving forward. I mean, asking this team with a team of a bunch of sixes that weren't comfortable moving forward, and then a forward line that just seemed to be discombobulated, and a striker that was dropping in, and wingers that just weren't doing much of anything at all, asking them to have a possession-based style where they're building from the back and creating chances. It was too much. It was like having a drag racer and asking it to be a Formula One car. A drag racer is really good at going straight, but whenever you ask it to make turns, it's just not going to be able to do it. In order to play tiki-taka, you need Xavi, you need Iniesta, you need Messi, you need Sergio Busquets, you need players who are within the same system, breathing that same system for years and years and years, developing that chemistry. In absence of that, you can't ask a team to play that style. It seems like it's so important to us right now to not just produce world-class players. It's also important to show the world that America can play soccer as well as some of the big boys. And maybe at the highest level, whenever we have our A-team, whenever we have Pulisic and Brooks and Adams and Dest and Reyna and all these guys, we can play that soccer. They can possess the ball up the field, build from the back. They can solve problems in the midfield. They can create chances like that. They can do it. But whenever you start talking about our B team and then our C team and then our D team, asking these guys to replicate that is just ridiculous. So why not go into the tournament, play to our strengths, bring some big athletic guys, and just win the thing? One of the huge criticisms that Jason Kreis faced whenever he selected his roster was not bringing Jeremy Ebobisse. Ebobisse is more in the mold of that player who's going to be a Route 1 player that you can just lump it up to him and he's going to be able to get in the box and get on the end of headers and stuff like that. He's not going to play that classic, beautiful possession-based soccer. But as you could see at the end of this game, whenever Herrera was just lumping in crosses and we were just trying anything we could do to get on the end of the ball, we just didn't have anyone in the box who looked like they were going to win a matchup. Whenever you're looking around and you see like Jonathan Lewis or Sebastian Soto or Jesus Ferreira or, even Johnny Cardoso, like who's that powerful guy who's going to win that header and win the game for the team? This reliance in playing the system and trying to play pretty soccer and build out from the back. Look, if you have the personnel to do it, Great. That's fantastic. It looks beautiful. I love what I saw from the senior team in the Jamaica game. I really liked what I saw in the Northern Ireland game. But this team just was not able to do that, and just forcing that on them was just the downfall. Look, all is not lost for the U.S. men's national team. I mean, at the top of the player pool, we still have fantastic players. I mean, that being said, for me, there's one reason why we didn't qualify for the Olympics, and that's just arrogance. We came to the tournament expecting that, we would just roll the ball out there, and these players were good enough. These players were so much better than the opposition that we would just win the game, that we could, build from the back and play this possession-style soccer without a whole bunch of practice, and it would just work. But the reality is that didn't happen. This Honduran team, and credit to the Honduran team, man, they came out and they played hard. They played like a team. They defended so well. I can remember so many times where we'd have counterattacks and Honduras would have 8 guys behind the ball before we could even move it upfield. That Honduran team showed us what it takes to qualify for the Olympics, and it's not having the best team on the field. It's having the team on the field, and I know this is a big sports cliche, but it just shows up so many times. The team that really wants it more. The team that is drilled, the team that knows its responsibilities and is able to go out there and execute. Guys, this is really disappointing, and I thought 4 years ago when we were unable to qualify for the Olympics that surely in the next 4 years we were going to be able to put out a much better team with much more resources and just be able to do this. It's ridiculous that despite the whole weight of U.S. soccer and even having MLS behind it, that we're not able to put together a team that can go out there and qualify for the Olympics. It's not like we're playing against the best of the best. It's not like we're playing against the best coaches in the world. We're playing against very small countries with very small budgets, with very small populations that we should be able to just steamroll over, but it just hasn't happened like that. There are good days ahead. We do have much better players at the top of the pool. There still are a lot of exciting things happening in U.S. soccer. This one's just hard to swallow. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're still watching and you're into this kind of thing, please hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button so that more people can see this video so they can be just as sad as you are right now watching this. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Sam, and this is the Anchor Board.